This is I'm going to attempt this, Haudenosaunee teaching. Obviously an Indian tribe, an Indian people. We are part of everything that is beneath us, above us, and around us. Our past is our present is our future, and our future is 7 generations, past and present. The nuclear industry is hoping for one last twilight dance, says Harvey Wasserman. It's dying in the United States, in Western Europe, and Japan. The big producers are banking on the hopes of sales to India, China, Iran, and maybe Turkey, he says. The problem of nuclear waste, according to Wasserman and others, is unsolvable. The only solution, he says, is to let the stuff sit where it is. Then 50 years from now, hopefully, we'll have better technology to deal with it. George Crocker, Executive Director of the North American Water Office, and a key force in the Prairie Island Coalition, echoes Wasserman. We're basically trying to figure out the best way to bequeath nuclear waste to the next generation. The more we produce, the more overwhelmed the next generation will be, he says grimly. For now, the waste debates in this country always seem to end up with the Indians. That is the reality that Virginia Sanchez continues to struggle with. We have been violated, but we don't have to get stuck in that rut of victimization, Virginia says. We've got our grandmothers, our spiritual people, tribal government representatives, all of them working together and having ceremony together. We do have a lot of power. Knowing that we're making progress, it may be in little bits and pieces, but we are definitely making progress. That's how you begin healing.
Okay, envision me as Winona LaDuke. I'm channeling her soul. So I'm honored to do that. She says things pretty eloquently. Oh. Despite our meager resources, we are winning many hard-fought victories on the local level. We have faced down huge waste dumps and multinational mining, lumber, and oil companies. And throughout the Native nations, people continue to fight to protect the earth for future generations. Some of the victories described in this book, this is called All, if you want to read it, it's pretty great, All Our Relations. Some of the victories include a moratorium on mining in the sacred hills of northern Cheyenne, the Blackfeet, and the Crow territories. An international campaign that stopped the building of megadams in northern Canada, the resolution of thousands of acres of white earth, which is where she comes from in northern Minnesota, and the rebuilding of a nation in Hawaii. I'm just going to take a break. Skylar and I were in Hawaii, and we met, sort of by accident, a native Hawaiian, and there's lots of them. And they really are pulling together to protect the earth. And it's very moving. Okay. Grassroots and land-based struggles characterize most of Native environmentalism. We are nations of people with distinct land areas, and our leadership and direction emerge from the land up. Our commitment and tenacity spring from our deep connection to the land. This relationship to land and water is continuously reaffirmed through deed and our way of being. It is perhaps best remembered in phrases like, "This is where our ancestors and children's umbilical cords are buried. That is where the great giant lay down to sleep, and these are the 4 sacred hills between which we were instructed to live." So now she goes on to talk about herself. She is an Anishinaabeg. I can't pronounce this very well. I live on an Anishinaabeg reservation called White Earth in northern Minnesota, where I work on land, culture, and environmental issues locally through an organization called the White Earth Land Recovery Project, and nationally through a Native foundation called Honor the Earth. We, the Anishinaabe, are a forest culture. Our creation stories, culture, and way of life are entirely based on the forest, the source of our medicinal plants and food, forest animals, and baskets. Virtually my entire reservation was clear-cut to the turn of the century. In 1874, my tribe's leader said, "I cried and prayed that our trees would not be taken from us, for they are as much ours as is this reservation." Our trees provided the foundation for major lumber companies, and their destruction continued for 10 decades. There is a direct link in our community between the loss of biodiversity, the loss of animal and plant life, and the loss of material and cultural wealth of our people. But we have resisted and are restoring. Today we are in litigation against logging expansion. Our experience of survival and resistance is shared with many others. But this is not only about Native people. In the final analysis, the survival of Native America is fundamentally about the collective survival of all human beings. The question of who gets to determine the destiny of the land and of the people who live on it, those with the money and those who prey on the land, is a question that is alive throughout society. The question is posed eloquently by the grandmother, Loretta Pascal. This is my reason for standing up, to protect all around us, to protect all Native cultures. Where did you get the right to destroy my forests and rivers? Why does that right supersede ours? I guess that's about it. I think the beauty of what she says here is that this is the land that we must save for everyone's sake. So there's a closing that Skylar's going to read.
Well, a little more in the closing. Rethinking the Constitution. Walt Brissett, an Anishinaabe man from the Red Cliff Reservation in northern Wisconsin, passed to the next world in early 1999. His passing was a huge loss to the Native environmental movement, but his groundbreaking work on re-envisioning the Constitution and Native treaty rights for the benefit of all people and the earth continues. Brissett was part of the Seventh Generation Movement, a movement that calls for a radical amendment to the U.S. Constitution. The preamble to the U.S. Constitution declares its intent to be to, quote, secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, unquote. In reality, U.S. laws have been transformed by corporate interests to cater to elite interests in society. While the U.S. Constitution makes no mention of corporations, according to anti-corporate analysts Richard Grossman and Frank Adams, quote, the history of constitutional law is, as former Supreme Court Justice Felix Frankfurter said, the history of the impact of the modern corporation on the American scene. Over the course of 2 centuries of court decisions, corporate contracts and their rates of return have been redefined as property that should be protected under the Constitution. In this way, the quote-unquote common good has been redefined as, quote, maximum corporate production and profit, unquote. Appointed judges have handed down decision after decision, increasing the privileges of corporations. Corporations have been granted the power of eminent domain and the right to inflict private injury and personal damage when pursuing, quote-unquote, progressive improvements. Most significantly, in 1886, the Supreme Court treated private corporations as, quote, natural persons, protected by the Constitution and, quote, sheltered by the Bill of Rights and the 14th Amendment. Consequently, American public policy and the legal system have largely come to reflect short-term views despite the intergenerational perspective foundational to the U.S. Constitution. At the 1995 United Nations Conference on the Status of Women in Beijing, Corinne Kumar from the Asian Women's Human Rights Campaign spoke of the legal challenges in the national and international arena of this area. The violence of the time, she explained, has outstripped the law. We have little understanding of our protection from the combined and cumulative impact of industrialism's complicated chemical soup on our bodies, ecosystems, or future generations. Public policy is lagging far behind our ability to destroy ourselves. The rights of the people to use and enjoy air, water, and sunlight are essential to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. These basic human rights have been impaired by those who discharge toxic substances into the air, water, and land. Contaminating the commons must be recognized as a fundamental wrong in our system of laws, just as defacing private property is wrong. On that basis, the seventh generation amendment to the Constitution of the United States declares, the right of citizens of the U.S. to enjoy and use air, water, sunlight, and other renewable resources determined by the Congress to be common property shall not be impaired, nor shall such use impair their availability for use by future generations. Thanks for nothing. So, thank you. Now, Ray, Ray needs no introduction. No, if I tried to, it would go on forever. He is back from Russia from that conference, international conference on decommissioning. Again, he was at the core of the decommissioning of Maine Yankee some years ago now, and he has been at the forefront in all those years. The eminently qualified Ray Shell.